If you've ever wondered what ADHD is, well, let's break it down.
Raising neurodivergent kids is messy, beautiful, and a lot. I'm Mary Ellen Yates, and this is Growing Together Neurodiversity at Home. Let's figure it out together.
Okay, let's get started. ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, a neurological condition that affects how the brain regulates attention, activity level, and self control. ADHD is not caused by a lack of parenting or lack of effort. It is a difference in how the brain is wired. It often runs in families, and that can be one of the tricky parts because if you also have ADHD and you're trying to manage someone with ADHD, there's a lot of executive function, maybe dysfunction going on there. But anyway, you can notice it as early as preschool or before preschool. Often they don't diagnose until the kids are school age. With the right support, people with ADHD can totally thrive. So, ADHDers often struggle with paying attention and staying focused, controlling impulses and behavior, emotional regulation, regulating activity, excess activity, or restlessness. But I also want sometimes this activity isn't necessarily physical, it can be brain activity. Your brain just does not stop. There can be difficulties with managing time, organization, a lot of executive functioning skills are affected. So, what does this mean? Kids with ADHD often have big emotions. They can be quite intense. They have difficulty with transitions, especially transitioning from a desired activity to an undesired activity. And they often have challenges in school like settings because they're often asked to do things that are not desired. There are generally three categories of ADHD. The first is inattention. Kids or even adults, if you haven't been diagnosed yet, can seem like they're daydreaming a lot, they're distracted, they're not paying attention, difficulty focusing, they have difficulty following directions, and they have frequent distractions. So I remember when I was in school, I was always an A student in school, so I was a good student. But I always remember the teacher would be talking, telling the directions, and it would go. So I'd either look on my paper if there was a paper there, or I would always raise my hand after and ask, what? I would need them to personally tell me myself. I had a hard time when they were talking to the group. For my son, this can often look like, oh, I see my siblings in the other room. Let me watch them instead of doing my math homework. Or if I ask to go get your shoes and then go brush your teeth, he might get to the shoes. It depends, but brushing the teeth is probably not happening, especially if it's more than one step direction. That's going to be kind of hard. Or along the way, he saw a sibling, they started talking, those shoes never happened. There can be tons and tons of examples of this. Another category is hyperactivity. Seem restless, excessive talking, difficulty sitting still, and impulsive actions. So, an example of this, one time we were walking along with friends, and my son was walking a little ahead with one of his little friends. He's probably maybe 6, maybe 7 at the time, and he sees a car coming. He decides to bend down and pick up a rock and throw it at the car. It did not do any damage, but why? Why? Impulsivity is can be so strong. Or even like thinking of myself or my husband, sometimes we can be impulsive with decisions we make. Adults, a lot of times, might have a hard time with addictive type things or liking to spend money. There's a lot of different things that can go along with the hyperactivity. But I also want to point out I was not recognized as having ADHD until I was 40 when I noticed it first. And I was not a super active person like what my son was or like my younger sister was. My younger sister had a very like obvious ADHD that a lot of boys like present as. Not all, that's a stereotype, but she presented more like boys typically do, and she was very active and she was getting into things. And so it was very obvious. But for me, my mind just never shut off. My mind was super hyperactive. I had a hard time sleeping. I could not stand to be bored. And I still cannot stand to be bored. I always had a book with me. I always had an activity bag with arts and crafts. I love to read. Like I always had to have something to do. And to this day, it's still true. I cannot stand having nothing to do even for a second. This extreme restlessness for me. But it wasn't very obvious because I did things that were culturally accepted and I was keeping busy and I wasn't interfering or distracting other people. And so it wasn't noticed that I just like had this like drive that I just like couldn't stop. Like I had to be always doing something. So just to keep that in mind, especially if you're questioning for a girl or someone that would present more like that, because again, it's a stereotype, but typically girls are missed because their hyperactivity is in their mind and not as physical. And then there's the combined type, which combines the first two. So ADHD symptoms can vary and change over time. For one, we're continuing to grow. We might have less stimuli as a kid or more stimuli as a kid, and things might get better or worse as we get older with our stimulation and how we can handle certain things. A lot of people think that adults don't have ADHD, but they continue it throughout their life. They just might have gained skills as they've gotten older to manage those ADHD symptoms, or they might marry a partner that helps them stay organized and helps them with those skills that might be a little harder for them. And so, getting a diagnosis. Most people would go to their primary care provider. They would gather a medical history. Again, genetically, it's very common to run in families. They would probably give you some questionnaires with like rating scales and whatnot. And then that information would be compared in the DSM, which is the diagnosis book for psychological diagnoses. Sometimes there can be further psychological testing done, or a care provider might be comfortable giving that diagnosis without that further testing. For my first son, I knew from a very young age he had it, but I didn't get testing until he went to the schools for academic testing, and it showed that he had moderate ADHD. It showed that every time he's had some kind of evaluation that he definitely has ADHD. And then for my second son, it was not nearly as obvious. I just noticed a little bit of inattention when he was doing schoolwork or at school when he wasn't really interested in the subject, but he was still able to focus and get his stuff done, unlike his other brother who needed a lot more support. And so for him, he was diagnosed with mild ADHD combined. So once you have a diagnosis, there is such thing as self-diagnosis too, but with a diagnosis, it becomes more resources. And one of those resources is being able to be medicated if you decide to do that. There are plenty of people that are not medicated. Some do not like the way it makes them feel. It's definitely a personal choice as to work for each family. But medication can be a huge tool that can help a lot with the brain chemistry in the brain and help people focus. Some people might self medicate with like in caffeine, like I do right now. Also, behavioral therapy can be very helpful. In therapy, you can work on emotional regulation, skills to help regulate big emotions. You can work on skills for time management. They can help you with impulse control. Also, an occupational therapist, especially for kids, might also be able to help with these skills. My first son was recommended to an occupational therapist for a second time for his ADHD symptoms, and it has helped in some ways. And he also sees a counselor to help him with those other emotions as well. Also, lifestyle adjustments. This is where parents can really do a lot to help their kids with their executive functioning skills. But I do think it's important to realize that one ADHD person is not the same as another ADHD person. We're all different. While there is a generalization of things that can help a lot of us, every person is different. So, parents helping with organizational skills, it's important to also coordinate that with your child because their ideas might actually work better for their brain. Having a lot of give and take and negotiation for working on those skills, but still trying to provide support for them. Eating foods that increase dopamine. When you have ADHD, you have chronic low dopamine. So, bananas, protein rich foods, dairy. There's a lot of different foods, different things that increase your dopamine. And so it makes you feel better. Exercise increases it and helps you feel better. Being out in the sun helps. My son's happy place is being outside. No matter what the weather is, he needs outside time. It improves his mood. so much. He needs that for himself. Being active and exercising is very important. A lot of these kids and adults can't stand sitting still anyway. We need to keep moving. So, somewhat, we're already motivated to do that, but having ways to keep moving and staying healthy, that can help a lot. We have a trampoline. We go on walks. We have bikes. We have scooters. My oldest son has a skateboard. We go swimming in the summer. We try to stay active doing things. It's very important physically, and it also releases endorphins and increases your dopamine and helps you feel better. So it helps your body and it helps your brain. Getting enough sleep is crucial, is crucial. So for any neurodivergence, sleep can be an issue. For my second son, when he was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, I mentioned that sleep was an issue for him. It would be probably 11 o'clock at night before he would fall asleep, and bedtime was 7. So he would be up for hours. And then my oldest son would be waking him up at like 5, 6 in the morning. So he was getting very little sleep. And for his little body, he needed a lot more sleep. But I wasn't sure what to do for him. I was considering melatonin, but I didn't want to just give it, even as a pediatric nurse, because I know there's some controversy about melatonin. When I went to the psychiatrist that gave his first ASD diagnosis, she's like, he has to sleep. We have to get sleep. He's not going to function. He's going to have a harder time if he doesn't get sleep. So then I felt like I was blessed, and I started doing melatonin for him, and that has helped a lot. Because for him, it is just getting to sleep. Once he's asleep, he does fine. He sleeps throughout the night. For my oldest son, we were doing melatonin for a while. It helped him go to sleep. Once that melatonin, like the 4 to 5 hours after wore away, he was up again. And then he was going through our pantries and throwing food around our house and doing all these disruptive things, or going through our stuff, or all these things at night. After the melatonin didn't work, then we are on a sleep aid to help him sleep. And that has made a world of difference. He gets more sleep. We're not paranoid about him doing stuff in the middle of the night when he's not being supervised, and we're all able to get a lot more sleep. So that has been very helpful for us. For me, for sleep, I have certain routines that I do to fall asleep, but I can't just go to sleep because I'm tired. I have to be at this level of exhaustion to go to sleep. Otherwise, I'll spend hours just laying in bed doing absolutely nothing and getting really frustrated. Okay, also structured routines. The more organized we can be, the more we thrive. Even though a lot of times consistency is one of those hard things, we have a hard time staying consistent because we're impulsive and we like to change things up. But at the same time, we crave those routines because they really do help us thrive. So routines are very important. If you would like to check out my morning time visual schedule, you can do that. It's a free download, and that might help you with your morning times. And then we do have a structured flow to our day. It's not an exact time for everything, because then that might not give my ADHD-ness flexibility I need to change things up. But we do have a structured flow with some anchors throughout the day, like what time we need to be done with our morning routine, around a ballpark time frame when we have lunch, ballpark when we have dinner, and the things we do in between those times. So the kids know what their day is supposed to look like and what their expectations are, and that helps them a lot. Also, mindfulness techniques, finding ways to relax. This is one way that I have a hard time, that I have a professional trying to help me with mindfulness, because my mind is going a million different directions, and sometimes I have a hard time staying in the moment, trying to relax. That's one of the things that I'm trying to work on right now. Those techniques can reduce stress, which is definitely an issue for me, and it can also help with focus. So tell me what ADHD looks like in your house. What clued you in that your child might have ADHD? I look forward to hearing from you and reading the comments. Thanks. Bye. Oh, and if you want a free visual routine, I have a free principle that you can download. The link's in the description.